Welcome back everyone. If you're new here, my name is Bryan Jenks. Today I'm going to do something I've been wanting to do for a very long time, which is give a beginning tutorial and somewhat intermediate tutorial, mostly because I'm just going to be pointing to the various resources, but how you combine these things is up to you, on Dataview, the Dataview plugin, one of the two biggest and most useful plugins in Obsidian that I think exist. I think the two biggest ones are Dataview and Templater. But today I'm going to talk about Dataview. So if you are interested in learning more about Dataview, maybe something you haven't heard of or seen before, stay tuned. So if you haven't heard or seen Dataview before and you're wondering what I'm even talking about, Dataview it's like the SQL language. If you've ever heard of SQL, SQL, databases, SQL is a very simple language. I've done a video actually about SQL on my channel before, and it's basically a query language that says, give me things where those things or the properties of those things meet such and such criteria, sort them like this, order them like that, limit to just this many. And it lets you just grab that data and present it. Dataview kind of does something like that. It will let you access your files, the metadata within those files, the name of it, the created time, the YAML metadata that you make for it, which you can create custom stuff. So the sky's really the limit with how far you could take YAML FRONTMatter and the Dataview plugin. So what we're going to do is actually use this plugin. And how do you use it? Well, it's simple. You create a code block in Obsidian, because a lot of these plugins use code blocks with custom headers in the code blocks to actually run plugin functionality. So it's going to be, the 3 backticks, Dataview, and then you close off the code block with another 3 backticks. And within that, you actually write your Dataview query. The query even writes a lot like SQL. It's not the same. There are a lot of differences, but if you have familiarity to some degree with SQL, then this will not be quite as painful. It might not be so much new stuff, but we're going to get into it.
The best ways to support the channel are, if you're going to do it on an ongoing basis, GitHub sponsors because they take no fees, followed by Patreon. If you're going to do like a one-time thing, buy me a coffee, PayPal, or just fine. And if you just want to support me without any money involved, the best thing you can do is like, comment, subscribe, share the video, and that's it.
All right. Jumping right in, I have the template demo vault. This is the standard out of the box. Everyone has this demo vault for just playing with new stuff. How do we get Dataview? Because it is a community plugin. It's not a core plugin. I'm going to go to the settings, the little gear in the bottom left. I'm going to go to community plugins, turn them on because we need to have them on to use them. Browse, and it's going to be number 2 right here or thereabouts. I mean, it's really popular. So Dataview, install, and it will install Dataview. We're going to enable it, and let's check out the options. So looking at the options, most of this I pretty much leave alone, even in my own vault. Now I actually do have some Dataview.js stuff. That's the more advanced things we'll get into later a little bit. But we have some other things, inline query prefix, just an equal sign, JavaScript inline query prefix, $sign ? What does that mean? We'll look at it later. Rendering nulls as a dash. So if there is no value for something, what do I show you, the user? And it's going to be a dash in this instance. Your date format, I personally prefer ISO 8601, which is year-month-day, but I'll just leave that as default because sure. Yeah, I don't really use anything else in here at all. Just leaving it default. I'm just going to leave it default for you. I mean, I'll turn on the advanced Dataview stuff right here. Enable JavaScript inline query, all that stuff. Other than those two, not changing a thing. You now have Dataview. How do we use it? So let's start off with a brand new note and let's get cracking. Let's look at what a Dataview query looks like. Okay, there are 4 types of Dataview queries. Actually, in the process of making this video, I actually learned about the 4th one. I had no freaking clue. So that's awesome. But there are 4 types of Dataview queries, and the 4 types really correspond to what kind of output you're looking to get. So the first one I'm going to talk about is list. So if I type list, or I really prefer having all caps for keywords, we first have the 3 backticks, the word Dataview, and then the actual query, and then closing it off. This is a Dataview query. Now, if I just write the word list, what happens? Nothing. But then if I add from, like we're getting a list from something, if you want to say just your entire vault, you can just use empty double quotes or even put a / in there. That totally works. So now if I say list from basically nothing, which means everything, then the result ends up being it shows me every note in the vault, including the one I'm looking at. And if you hover over it, you can actually see what are in those notes. So you can generate a list from what's in the vault. Now you can also add criteria. So we could say where file.name equals, and then in double quotes, we could say untitled. And now it will only show me this note, the one that this query is in. And yeah, wonder how, whoa, Inception. So this is what we can do with a list. And you could also write one piece of metadata to use after the list value, because by default, it's just going to show you the name of the note, but you can also see a piece of metadata afterwards, and only one. So if I do file.ctime, which is creation time, it will show me that. If I try to do anything else, any other value, it will not work. It will break. List can only show you the file name and then a piece of data. Now, if I'm wrong on any of these things or it's been updated since then, please comment, but this is my current understanding. So that's list. Now, what if I change this to table? Well, now we're going to get an output table. And just for good measure, we have the creation time, but let's also add tags. So then, so now we have an actual output table. So file, there's the name, the creation time, tags. Okay, let's actually remove this. Move that down there. And now we can see, wow, okay, so nothing in here actually has tags, but, yeah, so we get a table of output results. Putting it back, let's actually add a tag to this file, tags. Let's just call this YouTube. I can't spell. So now we are giving this note the tag YouTube. Then Dataview should, in fact, update, but it doesn't. Why? Because I think it's actually expecting to see this in the YAML FRONTMATTER instead of the outgoing links, which is basically how the tags are being treated. So what we need to actually do is above this, we can actually add some YAML FRONTMATTER, and this will come in handy later on when we do some stuff with Dataview. So tags, YouTube. Then we should see this update, hopefully. And there's the YouTube tag. So we don't need that one. Now, Dataview, you could see, might not update automatically. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But in this case, we actually want to see tags, and there's the tags. Now, what's another type of output we can do? The other one we can do is task. So task will do exactly what you think it will do. We're going to see a list of all of the tasks from a given note. So in this note, we can't do any of the other values because we're just looking at tasks. So it threw an error. There are no tasks within our current note, but we can add one. Hello world. Bam. All right. So now, why isn't Dataview updating? There it is. It just updated. So now this task is visible in Dataview from the note we're currently in. Now, if this was a list of all the tasks from a particular folder, like a project folder, or your entire vault to keep track of all these little miscellaneous tasks floating around, guess what we can do within Dataview? I can actually click and complete that task from within Dataview. So if you want to centralize task management from across your entire vault, you can do that with Dataview if you use tasks heavily. Now let's actually remove where file name equals untitled. We're going to say, show me all tasks in the entire vault. And then we can see, wow, there's a lot of other tasks here. I haven't made or touched any of these. These are all from the default documentation stuff here. But there's every task in the entire vault. That's pretty awesome. So now one thing we can do is task from everything where exclamation point completed. So I want to see all tasks that are not completed. Now we see these. Why is this one here? That's weird. Wonder why. Ah, it's got a question mark. So it's not explicitly completed via the X, but it looks like it is. Actually, wasn't expecting that, but interesting. But now let's do one more thing. Let's actually add a group by file.link. So now we can say, okay, so here's a note called task, where I'm guessing they're explaining that. And then we could see, oh, and here are all of the uncompleted tasks, or incomplete tasks, on that note. Now if I uncheck ours and let this update, you'll see a new grouping of one that shows our current note. And so in this way, you can actually break out which notes have which tasks, among other criteria. And we'll get more into the specifics of the examples later on, but this is the task type of output. And the next one we're going to cover is calendar. All right, so calendar. We're going to say calendar, and let's do from, and we're just going to do the whole vault. Not liking that. Why aren't we liking that? Because calendar, of course, being something that deals with date and time, needs a date and time field to actually work off of. So what I'm going to do is file.mtime, which is file.modified time from the whole vault. And what it's going to do is it's going to show you based on the dates. So today, the 28th. Ah, interesting. Now, because I made this demo vault today, what it's basically telling me here is that because I made today this entire vault for demonstration purposes, is that it thinks all of the files were modified today because basically they didn't exist until I made them today. So that's why it's saying today, the 28th of January, when I'm filming this, is when all of this, all the dots are all of the content writings. So basically more dots means more content or more writing, more stuff was produced. So if you actually do this particular Dataview query on like a project folder or your entire vault, it'll show you the dots on the days going all the way back, however far you want, the entire history of whatever you selected. So if you want to see the modified time of any note in your entire vault across history of time, this can show you that. And that's just very simple query in Dataview. And you can even make this a single line, calendar from modified time from the whole vault, and bam, there's your query. And that will show you everything. It's kind of useful. And what you could also do is you could also add some where criteria to this. And you could say, let's see, where tags equals YouTube. And then it's just going to show you 28th, basically that day, because that is when we wrote our current note, untitled. And the reason why it's doing this nesting effect is because this is the note that this query lives in. But this is the only one tagged YouTube. That's the only one that now shows up in the calendar plugin. So if you want to do exclusionary criteria to say, hey, calendar, show me this distribution of content creation across this particular time variable, but only where the notes are tagged maybe seedlings, like I want to see how much seedlings I've done or how much I've worked on my evergreen notes, you can do that with this particular type of query. So now we've talked about the types, you've seen some stuff, and you might still not understand the syntax. And you're asking, how do I write this? How do I understand this syntax? What is it? Calendar, from, where, order, group by, what? Where do I learn about this? First of all, there is a lot, and it's really great, standard documentation on Dataview. And I'll link that somewhere, comment or description. The documentation on Dataview is pretty good. GRUD. The documentation is pretty good. Do check it out. It's very informative, and it's what I reviewed in preparation to making this video. But also, again, if you have experience with SQL, it will be much easier to understand this. And the syntax is pretty handy, and it's pretty simple. So starting over, the thing that differs between Dataview and SQL, at least at face value in the beginning, is that there's no select word. Like you don't say select something from something. You basically say what kind of output you want. So that's where we say, table. And if we don't say anything else, table will probably just give us the name of the files. Or does it get mad? No, it gives us the name of the files. So we can just leave it at that. Give me a name of a list of files. So then you say from. Where do you want this from? But the actual order of operations in a SQL query and therefore in Dataview is actually from statement gets executed first. So first, we actually get the from statement, which let me write this out here. So 1, it's from. 2, it's where criteria is valid. So from this location where things meet this condition, then it's basically the select, or in this case, the output mode, list, or table, because you're saying, you know, from this area where these things meet this criteria, give me these fields, like tags or end time, whatever. Then it's letting you sort them, because you already have the output, it's selected. Now from that output, sort it, and then you have the option to flatten it, which we'll get into flatten later. It's something that I've only experienced in Dataview, not necessarily like SQL or T-SQL that I'm familiar with. But then we also have the ability to do group by, which you've seen a brief example of, like the tasks where it groups things as like a sub item underneath the main thing. So we have group by. And then finally, there's limit, which says basically, okay, from this location where things meet this criteria, I've grabbed these fields. Now this data that I've been given, I want to sort it, optionally flatten it. I want to group it by this particular field, and then of all of this now output, I want to limit how many records of this formatted output are returned to me. Maybe I only want 10. That's what limit does. And that's the order of operations within a Dataview and usually SQL query. So let's actually apply some of these methods. Okay, so you've seen me say table from, and this is basically just the very default query. I'm going to remove those just so I don't get a long query. So what we've done is table from. So select is basically the table or the fields, because you'd say table tags, comma, file.mtime. This is where you're selecting your fields. So basically the table keyword is your equivalent of select, or you're selecting your type of output. Then we've done from, so we know where we're getting stuff, and if we have exclusionary criteria, then we indicate it. And we have, you know, this is going to be basically table. So let me just actually write table, task, list, calendar. Okay. And we already have those here. So you've seen me say from and just empty quotes for the whole vault. There are more ways to actually specify what you want to see. So I could actually list out a path, and I could say guides, and it will actually list out all of the files underneath that folder. So you could do folder paths. You could also do, like, what's a guide? Let's do guide/link notes. So now it only links that file because it's a hard-coded path, but you can do like an actual path like that. So if you want to say this particular file, show me tasks, because all of my to-dos and tasks are within that file, there's a use case for that. Next, what you can also do is the actual tags. So we could say YouTube, and now we see this note. And actually, this has been fixed, and I think I was probably the instigator of constantly badgering Dataview developers about the emoji system I use, because if I actually add an emoji for that tag, and then I just do hashtag and then the emoji, it actually works now. This did not used to work. I might have had to actually use it in the where criteria or do something janky, but it actually works as it should now. So a table of items from a list of items that are under this tag. So whatever's tagged with this tag will now appear underneath this table, which is awesome and very handy for me. So let's just go back to, let's go back to guides. Okay, so we don't have where, but we could say where file.name equals link notes. There we go. So now we also have a where criteria. Awesome. Now, if we want multiple items and we want to actually like sort them, here's what we can do is let's get rid of this, and we're just going to see all the files. Okay. Now, luckily, they are actually already ordered. They're sorted by name. But what we can do is we can actually say, let's do file actually, let's just do, there's probably no tags. So let's actually do We can just do reverse. So sort file.name. So we're sorting those files by name, which is the exact same because they were already sorted by default. But let's do descending, and it actually reverses the order, because by default it's always sorted ascending, which is the same as SQL. So we've actually done sort, which is pretty useful once you get that output. Even group by output, you can then do this. So then we can do, let's actually do something with tasks next. Okay, so we're going to look at tasks from formatting, the folder formatting, because that's where that task node is. And we're still going to sort the file name descending. Okay, so I don't see the file name. That's okay. I mean, it just gives you tasks, and it's still in the background sorting by the file name. That's the only file that's there. Because if I went to formatting and actually added a new note and said testy test, and then added a task, test task, completed one, just for references, and then we go back here, now you could see, okay, but here's that and that, but why are those two above that one? Because alphabetically, task and testy test, and we're sorting descending, so they're switched. So normally these should be above that one. But in any case, it'll be more apparent after this next step, which is group by file.link. Actually, let's do file.name. We can see, there we go. Okay, but now that we're doing the group by, it's still sorting ascending now. That's weird. Maybe if we move the sort after. Nope. That's odd. So maybe if we do group by file.link. Nope. Looks like you can't actually sort it after the group by, which is a little different than SQL. But what we can do is, you saw the difference of the name and the link. So when you have name, it's not actually clickable. I can't hover, I can't see the note, I can't actually click on the note. But when you do file.link, it actually will let you go to that note or see it in this instance. I can navigate here, I can complete that task if I want. Okay, and then where not completed. There we go. Remember, that one's the question mark. But that way we've also done group by. Cool. Oh, go back. So now let's actually remove the where, because I want to see everything. Okay, sort's not really working anymore after the group by, so that's okay. That's just what we have to live with. But now let's actually limit to 2. That's weird. Why isn't it giving me stuff? Why is it giving me so much? So limit, let's actually do that on a different query. So I'm going to do data view table from guides. Okay, we get 4 notes. So now what I'm going to do is say limit 2. Now we get 2 notes. So it might just be group by causing the weirdness. That's okay, but you can see how limit might actually be implemented. You get output like that, and you want to limit how much of it is there, because you could sort it so that you have descending. Like if you have things ordered by name, and those names start with dates, which is something that I do. I date a lot of my input notes. You could say order by the file name, and the name is dates, and then show me the last 5. So that way you could see the last 5 notes that you created that have dates in the name, and then order them by those dates. This would be a very potentially useful query, especially if you use these queries to feed into the database folder plugin. Made a video about that, I think, or maybe I'm making a video about that. That's an awesome plugin too. So we've seen limit. Now, where the heck does flatten come into play? Now, flatten will take a little bit of time to set up, but basically, if you have some YAML FRONTMATTER like this, and you want to consolidate the records and compress them, that's where that comes in handy. And let me show you what that looks like. Okay, in setting up the flatten example, what we're going to have is we're going to have a table from guides. Well, actually, I want everything. And I want to see aliases from everywhere, where aliases is not equal to null. Basically, show me all the notes that have an alias from the entire vault, and then show me the name of the node and its aliases, which only shows me the two that I modified, which is testy test and untitled. And here we see each of these records with 3 different nodes here, 3 different bullet points, because it's an array in the YAML. So in YAML, we can specify like an array of values, for instance, and you can get really complex and really deep on how you structure the YAML, feed that into Dataview, and ooh, it's really crazy how complex it can get. But let's see one thing here. If I have these aliases and this stuff listed here, how do I actually use flatten? So flatten actually is at the end, and what you do is you actually specify the fields that you actually are trying to flatten by, which I'm guessing it's letting you do multiples. So we're flattening the aliases. So show me a table of the file names plus their aliases from everywhere where the aliases aren't null, so basically files that have aliases, and then flatten by aliases. And you'll see this. So instead of it being one note name and then 3 bullet points, it gives you all of the records. So then what else can we do with this? We flatten by the aliases. So now let's actually sort by the aliases. So now they're sorted alphabetically. Then we actually want to limit to 2 of those sorted aliases. And now you've just written all that data query. Bam. That's all, basically, most of, if not all, of the actual keywords. And that's how you build your basic Dataview queries. Now it gets a little bit more advanced from here, and we're going to cover a few intermediate things, but that's enough to really get started and really start getting a handhold on your data inside of your vault and run with it. Because Dataview can do some really amazing stuff. And this is just the vanilla Dataview plugin. This isn't even the Dataview JS API or any of that stuff, because that is a whole other ball game. But believe me, there is a lot you can do with Dataview. So finally, let's actually cover some more of the intermediate examples of what we can do with Dataview out of the box, not even the Dataview JS API, because believe me, we'll get there eventually. I got a video planned for that. So first of all, there are inline queries. There's also inline data. So you've seen aliases up here. Let's actually get rid of some of this junk so we can see what I'm talking about. Okay. All right, so we can see, I'm going to remove the flatten too, that untitled has these 3 aliases. Now, what happens if I actually define some special metadata inside of the file, not in the YAML header? You can do that. So I say aliases, and then I can do double colons, and then I could say 4, 5, 6. Oh, it might actually not like that. There we go. Oh, it doesn't like that either. Interesting. So what we can do with the double colons is we can actually define metadata within the file itself that actually goes into the YAML FRONTMATTER in essence. So you can see they are listed here. There's this bullet point here because it's starting to get wonky. So like I have this defined in 2 places. Don't do this. But what you can do is you can specify custom fields and metadata. So let's say I have an input node. I'm going to say author : myself. And then I want to say, hey, show me table, and I want to say author, and I can remove all of that. There's no authors until you get to my node, and there I am. I defined this custom field. This is not in the YAML metadata. So you can actually define metadata that goes and actually affects the YAML available from the file that Dataview can access from within the file itself. This is amazingly handy. It really is. So you can make your own custom fields without having to put it all in YAML and deal with all of that stuff. So that's really, really handy. So moving on, what we can do is actually do inline queries. So this whole code block thing, you don't even need to do that, because what you could do is inline queries if you want to dynamically put a value within your node. What you do is the backticks, and then the equal sign. You saw this in the Dataview settings earlier. The equal sign is the inline query modifier. So this is how you actually write an inline query. Now, the advanced JavaScript Dataview JS one that we're going to cover in another video, that's the $, equal sign. This is just the equal sign. So backticks, equal sign, and you could say this.file.name. And it shows you the file name. Now what happens if we say ctime, the creation time? That's the time this file was created. If we change it to mtime, this is now the time the file was modified. If I enter, let's see, I'm going to wait for it to turn into the next minute, but let's see if we can do it live on the camera. So if I say hello world and define my own custom YAML metadata, then as soon as the time ticks over the next minute, this Dataview query should actually update the inline query and show me that new time. Of course, I might have to wait a little bit longer than I'd like. And what also might happen is that it might not update by itself. I might actually need to re-render the document, or poke the query in essence, to get it to refresh. But basically, when you reopen the file, it should be the latest value that it's showing you. So if you're just doing this for like the modified time, then it should work just fine. So now the time ticked over. It did not update, but then if I click here on the line and then click off, it should have updated. So I'm not sure why it's not doing it. mtime. Odd. Maybe it's because I didn't actually type in the note. Okay. So I'm guessing it doesn't count YAML metadata as modification, which I find weird. But you can see that it actually updates when you basically poke it. And if you close the file, reopen it, it'll also show you that field live. And this works for any of these fields. So if I said file.hello, hello world, it should show me world. Why it's not doing that, I'm not sure, because it should be. So let's actually do file.tags. Okay. Hello, : world. Let's actually go back and say hello. Huh. Weird. I'm not sure why it's not picking up the custom stuff, and it very well should be, but in any case, inline queries. Super useful for filling in pieces of metadata within your files. Very handy. Now, Dataview comes with a myriad of functions, believe me. There's a ton of them, and you definitely need to go check out the documentation on the site for them. But as an example, one thing you can do this inline query with, including like an actual function, is you could say something like today is, and then you could have the inline query say, instead of it being like this file doing something or the metadata from the file, we're going to do a function of date, today, close it off, and then we're going to say, oh, there's the date. Today is that date. And there you go. You now have some dynamic content inside of your note. So that is incredibly useful for, say, like a dashboard or something that you want to print off daily. You could have it update. And then we could also say, now the this dot whatever data doesn't work, but what does work is if I say hello, or actually, one second, this dot file dot, let's do steps. Might just be angry with the output. Yeah, so they say steps, and we actually give it a value of like a number, like the steps you did today walking, and you go out, oh, sorry, it's not this.file, it's just the value, because I guess this is like the file itself, and then file's actually accessing the YAML metadata. I'm learning as I make this video. So then you can say this. So if we actually did that hello world example I was showing earlier, we could do the exact same thing as this.hello to access the custom variables. That's the way to do it. So then what also is really cool is that let's say your document wants to test based on something. I'm like, did I reach my walking goal today? Did I walk 10,000 steps? In which case this one's saying, no, you didn't. What you can do is you can say, let's just do, here, I'll copy and paste my example. It's easier and I'll explain it. Bam. Okay, so we could say some text, emoji, goal reached. We could say inline query choice. So this dot steps, the value, is it greater than 10,000? If so, then yes, input the text. If not, then no, get moving. And that's the query. So this is basically your classic case statement from SQL, or an if statement. And you can see it actually spit out the correct answer. So now if steps becomes this much, almost 100,000, then if I refresh that, yeah. And so this can tell you daily, like based on the YAML metadata or the custom data you add, like did you meet your goals for that particular day, where this.steps blah, 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 blah. And if this is an inline query, you could also make it only look at this particular note, or you just have it be a data view query. Like there's so many ways to access and actually utilize the metadata via YAML and data view that it's literally crazy how much you can do with this. And with that, that's actually going to be the last of this video's particular content. These are the basics, the actual basics, the actual queries, the 4 types of output, the functions that are available, some basic syntax. There is so much more that we're going to cover in a future video, but DataView is amazing, and I think it is, alongside Templater, one of the 2 most important plugins in the Obsidian ecosystem. Check it out, play with it, make use of it, implement it, you're gonna love it. And on that note, I hope you loved the video. If you did, drop a comment in the comment section below. Tell me your thoughts. What do you like about it? How have you used it? Let me know. Talk to me. And don't forget, like, subscribe, ring the bell, because that's the only way you're going to get notified every time. And I will catch you all in the next one.